A History of Eärwa, based on the works of R. Scott Bakker. Original words by Adam Whitehead. Artwork by Jason Deem. Adapted for YouTube by J.R. Hazelton. Part 3. The Apocalypse. In the centuries following the breaking of the gates, the four tribes of men carved civilizations across Eärwa. In the ancient north, the Norserai forged a heretical alliance with the Kunoroi of Ishoriel. The non-men tutors, the Siku, imparted the secrets of their civilization to humanity. Chief among them, the Gnosis, the unparalleled sorcery of their Kuya mages. By the 22nd century, the founding of the Kunioric Empire brought the ancient North to the zenith of its glory, achieving an unrivaled golden age in human history. Sometime around 2120 Year of the Tusk, the largest and most powerful of the Gnostic schools, the Sohonc, proclaimed a new Grand Master, Seswatha, the hero of the apocalypse. A prodigy in the sorcerous arts, Seswatha was also a charismatic leader and a shrewd political operator. Under his guidance, the learned school deepened its ties to Kunyori's ruling dynasty, forged a powerful bond with the future emperor, Anasarimber Celmomis II. Seswatha also sought to restore relations between the empire and the non-men of Ishoriel, now called Ishtarabinth by men, after their centuries-old tutelage had ended in acrimony. He earned the respect of Nilgikis, the legendary non-men king, who in millennia past had led the war against the Inkoroi. And it was from his non-men allies that Seswatha first received dire warning of a looming catastrophe. Centuries earlier, the Gnostic school of Mengeke had been banished from Soglish for heresy and murder. Seeking refuge in Golgotarath, the ruinous ark of the Inkoroi, they found new patrons. The Archmage of the Mengeke, Sheonarnra, swore fealty to Orang and Orax, and in return, they revealed the secrets of their abhorrent craft, the Techne. Together, with the non-man traitor Makaratrig, they formed a wicked cabal, which they dubbed the Consult. Now, over 4 centuries later, Sheonarnra somehow still lived, a feat that earned him a new name, Shauriatus, Cheater of the Gods. According to the non-men, the Consult had secretly masterminded the Shrank Wars, a series of devastating raids by Shrank hordes against the nation of Eorsi to the east. And the Siku gave Seswatha a final warning, one of the Consult's true undertaking, the creation of a mysterious weapon of infinite slaughter, one capable of murdering entire nations, the product of an unholy combination of Inkoroi mechanism and the forbidden sorcery of the Mengeke, something they called the No-God. Seswatha, in turn, brought this knowledge to Celmomis II, who now ruled as High King. The Archmage of the Sohonc convinced his old friend that Golgotarath remained a threat to the world, one that needed to be destroyed before its dark designs could be brought to fruition. And so, in 2123 Year of the Tusk, the High King of Kunyori, Anasarimber Celmomis II, declared his great ordeal, the assemblage of a vast host of armies and sorcerers that would march on Golgotarath, end the threat of the Consult, and destroy the Inkoroi once and for all. Eorsi, which lay in the shadow of the Golden Ark, and had suffered most from their depredations, rallied to the call, contributing many tens of thousands of warriors already hardened during the Shrank Wars. Nilgikis sent his Kuya mages and Ishroi warriors from Ishtarabinth. Even the sovereign of distant Kyranius, Prince Anaxophis, sent a detachment of soldiers, so far-reaching was the renown of Seswatha. In 2124 the great ordeal crossed onto the plains of Aegon Garia, but was engaged by a host of Shrank and Bashrags, now the slaves of the Consult. The resulting battle was indecisive, and the ordeal withdrew across the Sursa to winter in Dagliash, a cliffside fortress built to check the power of the Consult. Celmomis renewed the offensive in the early spring, fording the Sursa before the Consult could prepare a defense, The enemy was forced to retreat to Golgotarath and allow the ordeal to encircle it. The three hosts surrounded and occupied the Ark for 6 years, an event known to history as the Great Investiture, but failed to starve the consort into surrender. The investiture was hindered by squabbling between the commanders of the ordeal and disagreements over strategy. To make matters worse, though the siege was complete, the consort never seemed to lack for supplies. While the siege went uncontested for years, taking further ground was a perilous task. Golgotarath was surrounded on all sides by the Occlusion, the ring of mountains created by the Arkfall. The consort's stronghold had but one point of ingress, the gatehouse of the Ubil Maw, named so for the thousands of Ishroi it had consumed during the Kuno and Koroi wars. Assaulting the gate by conventional means proved suicidal. Eventually, Celmomian II ordered Seswatha and his schoolmen to breach the gates of the Ark. But the consort mages, grown powerful in their corruption, had so far matched the combined might of the Kuya and the Sohonc. And in the resulting battle, the consort sprung an infamous trap, the Great Korei Hail, and the Sohonc lost a third of their school in an instant. The loss was catastrophic for the Kunyuric forces and the Grand Master's reputation, as well as his friendship with the High King, which would suffer greatly from the debacle. By 2131, an even more serious rift had erupted between Celmomian II and Anasarimber Nymeric, king of Eärwa. Continuous disputes over command resulted in the total withdrawal of the Kunyuri contingent of the ordeal, taking with them any realistic hopes for victory. A year later, the consort went on the offensive, employing passages reaching under the Black Furnace Plain and into the Ring Mountains. The consort launched devastating attacks into the ordeal's rear and flanks. Much reduced by the absence of the Kunyuri forces, the ordeal's army almost collapsed. Kuya and Sohonc sorcery allowed at least a small part of the army to escape, but Nilgikus was so enraged to learn that the battle had cost the lives of 2 of his sons that he recalled the Kunaroi contingent of the ordeal altogether. In 2134, hordes of Shrank and Bashrag marched in force against the cities of the Eärwa. King Nymeric was forced to abandon the investiture and retreat back to Shirau, the Eärwa capital. Celmomian II realized his folly too late and tried in vain to rally to their defense. After withdrawing from the investiture, the Eärwa fleet was offered safe harbor in the Kunyuri port of Aesaria, where it was promptly destroyed by consort agents in an event known as the Burning of the White Ships. The next year, Anasarimber Nymeric died in battle, and one by one the cities of the Eärwa fell to the slave races of the consort. The wailing masses of innocents were consumed by the flames of Raku, the gluttony of the Bashrags, or the licentious fury of the Shrank. And everywhere the people of the Kunyuri were struck by terror and disbelief that the old and mighty cities of the Eärwa could be annihilated in such short order. The situation seemed bleak, but in 2137, Anasarimber Naukayuti, the prince of the Kunyuri, won a stunning victory over the consort, facing and defeating the Raku Tanafoot the Red in single combat, a feat undreamt of since the Kuno and Koroi wars. Naukayuti would go on to lead the victorious army to rout the consort at the ruins of Shirau, driving the remnants back across the Sursa by the end of 2138. The next year, Naukayuti recaptured Dagliash and launched several major raids across Agongaria to cull the number of Shrank and Bashrags. Then, in 2140, working together, Naukayuti and Seswatha executed a daring covert raid on the Golden Ark, descending deep through foul chambers and labyrinthine passageways. Inside the vessel's cavernous hold, they uncovered a city of horrors, guarded by Shrank and Bashrags and populated by scores of wretched innocents, prisoners of the consort, captives who were forced into miserable toil or used as fodder for depraved experiments. This dangerous gamble abruptly changed the fortunes of the war, as the two heroes succeeded in recovering the Heron Spear, the Inkoroi weapon of light first wielded by their fallen king Sil. Together they bore the weapon back to Soglish in great triumph, but their victory turned sour for now Coyote died soon thereafter, poisoned in a cowardly act of treachery. The imperial prince was interred, rather than cremated in the Kuniori tradition, but in a despicable act of malice, the consort defiled his grave and absconded with his remains. The consort resumed their offensive in 2141, perhaps hoping for a loss of Kuniori morale following now Coyote's death, but this hope proved false, for the next 2 years saw several decisive Kunioric victories, and the consort forces were forced back into the Ark. Anasarimber Celmomis began the second investiture in the fall of that year, unaware that the consort themselves were now simply playing for time, as deep within the halls of the Ark, their millennial plan now reached its culmination. To this day, no one knows exactly what transpired, save that, somewhere in the pits of Golgotarath, the consort finally achieved their millennial undertaking, sparking the very warning that had first led to the Great Ordeal. However they did it, they completed the construction of the carapace, a sarcophagus of Techne origin, fused with 11 Korae to render it immune to sorcery. And inside the carapace they created, or unleashed, an entity of supreme and terrible power. The entity has had many names: the Great Ruiner, the World Breaker, called Suruma, the Hated One in Kyranian, revered as Lokung, the Dead God, by the Skilvendi, and Kara Sin Kurimoy by the Non-Men, the Angel of Endless Hunger, but in the 3 seas, it is still known best by the name given to it by the ancient Kuniori, Mog Farao, the No God. In the spring of 2143, the carapace emerged floating from somewhere near the top of the Ark, an event the consort called Initiation. Gusts of wind started to form around the object, quickly becoming first a gale and then a roaring whirlwind, until an enormous black cyclone appeared, bearing down upon the forces of the second investiture. Upon the instant of initiation, every unborn child in the world was immediately stillborn, beginning the horror known as the Years of the Crib, and a feeling of dread fell across all of humanity, drawing all eyes to the northern horizon. Shrank, Bashrag, and Raku, including any who had so far escaped being forced into the war so far, were compelled to answer the call of the No God, and descend on the black furnace plain in numbers beyond counting, a horde that blanketed the horizon. The forces of the second investiture were destroyed utterly, but the horde of the No God did not march immediately. Instead, the consort waited as a vast host of Shrank gathered and began breeding. This gave the Kuniori a very brief space in which to cry for aid. All of Eärwa answered. The armies of Ishtarbinth marched under Nilkikis, and Kyranius sent a significant division to lend aid. Other nations, more distant, began to muster as well, but the distances were too far, and time ran out. Anasarimber Celmomis II led the so-called Second Ordeal into battle against the horde of the No God on the fields of Elionot. Celmomis had hoped to use the Heron Spear against the abomination, but although a vast whirlwind gathered on the far horizon, the entity itself had no need to give battle. Its vast army of minions far outsized the Second Ordeal, and the Kuniori were soon engulfed. Nevertheless, Celmomis II and his knights made a bold stand. He threw himself into the battle with a rare fury, but soon was mortally wounded. Seswatha led a rallying force to retrieve the High King, who died in the arms of his old friend, but not before imparting a fateful prophecy.
One of my seed will return, Seswatha, and Anasarimber will return at the end of the world.
The great river cities of the Amrys Valley fell soon after. The panicked masses could only watch helplessly as their defenders were overrun by gibbering Shrank and their soldiers smashed by consort monstrosities. Even the Gnostic mages of the ancient north were no match for the armies of the No God. One by one they were cast down as salt by Korae bowmen, or had their sorcerous wards cracked like eggshells by Dragonflame. The non-men of Ishtarbinth retreated over the Demua Mountains to their mansion, The horde of the No-God pursued, laying siege to the exalted mansion for 2 years. Ishtarabinth shut its famed inner gate, reinforced with materials harvested from the Ark in millennia past. And neither the No-God, nor even the famed Sun Lance of Orang, the last functioning in Korai's Spear of Light, save the Heron Spear, could gain entry. Repulsed, the No-God turned south and laid waste to the other nations of the ancient north, and many great cities of men were annihilated. The Maoran Empire mounted a valiant defense, but still eventually collapsed in 2150. The retreating Maori armies, led by Prince Nosal, fled to the Cathol Pass, the gateway to the Three Seas, where they were greeted by an advancing Cunaroi host from Kilaugus, led by King Ginursis, a powerful wielder of the Gnosis. The refugee Norserai warriors and the non-men Ishroi turned and stood together against the No-God. The Battle of Cathol Pass, fought in the autumn of 2151, was an unexpected victory for the forces of men. The Maori warriors and the non-men Ishroi made common cause, and Ginursis granted the northerners safe refuge at Kilaugus. Their alliance successfully repulsed several consort assaults on the pass over the course of the next year. However, for reasons unknown, this alliance ended in treachery, when Nosal ordered the sacking of Kilaugus and the extermination of every non-man within. Cathol Pass was left undefended, and the No-God and his armies marched unopposed into the Three Seas. During this period, the crowded cities of the south cried out to their gods for divine intervention. The people begged their priests and priestesses to explain. Why do the gods allow the annihilation of their worshippers? Why do the gods permit the destruction of their own temples? Why had the 100 not interceded to stop the consult? None could answer. For when the clergy had petitioned the gods for help, they had gotten only bizarre responses. The gods could not sense or perceive the existence of the No-God, and had no awareness of the consult. The 100 only saw the death and destruction that was being caused, which they blamed solely on the violent predilections of mankind. The gods could not intervene because they had no conception of the disaster, no solution to offer other than to punish mankind further. In 2153, the horde of the No-God destroyed the armies of the Shirati Empire and plunged those nations into chaos and collapse. It then turned west to invade Kyranius. The Skilvendi, the long-established pastoralists living beyond the mountains to the northwest, had unexpectedly declared for the No-God and invaded Kyranius' flank, threatening to trap the kingdom in a vice. King Anaxophis V led Kyranius at that time. A friend of Seswatha's, Anaxophis ruled and battled with skill and cunning. He evaded the trap set for him and brought his forces to the south, choosing to fight a war of attrition, harassing the flanks of the No-God's horde and withdrawing before the enemy could respond. Kyranius was effectively overrun and destroyed by the end of 2154. But Anaxophis and his army, now aided by Seswatha and the other survivors of the Gnostic schools, they withdrew through the mountains to the ruined ancient city of Mengeta, already the site of innumerable battles. The blasted landscape, dotted with ruins, provided Anaxophis and his army with cover and defense. And the prolonged guerrilla tactics favored by Anaxophis had helped reduce the size of the horde. But the desperate gamble paid off, because to ensure victory and the destruction of the last enemy who might be any threat, the No-God finally took the field. As the terrible whirlwind moved towards the Kyranian lines, it spoke through the millions of throats of the Shrank horde that moved alongside with it. The No-God called out to them, as it always had.
What do you see?
The No-God's approach provided King Anaxophis V the one chance he needed to enact a strategy he'd been holding on to since Celmomius II perished on the fields of Elionat 11 years before. With Seswatha at his side, Anaxophis took up the Heron Spear and fired it directly upon the shining carapace of the No-God. The whirlwind burst asunder, and the slave armies fell into disarray and were routed. The consorts salvaged what they could of the No-God's remains and fled, drawing back to distant Golgotarath in defeat. The apocalypse ended there, on the fields of Mengeta, with the once mighty and glorious empires of the far and middle north reduced to utter ruin for all of time. The jewel of human civilization had been lost to heretical madness and raving savagery. But the legacy of that civilization lived on in the nations of the Three Seas. The Kyranians and the Maori settled new homes, and some few northern cities had been spared the consul's wrath, such as Atrathau and Sakarpus. Seswatha gathered together the few surviving Gnostic sorcerers and founded a new school, building the fortress of Eärwa on the island of Naran. The School of the Mandate, named for their core tenant, to uncover and destroy the consult wherever they may be found. For Seswatha knew that even though the No-God had been destroyed and their designs thwarted, the consult sorcerers had survived. The Inkaroi princes yet lived. The hordes of Shrank and Bashrag, and even a few surviving Raku, had merely dispersed. For the final words spoken by the High King Celmomian II, as he lay dying on the fields of Elianat, foretold of another Anasarimber, one that would come at the world's true end. The prophecy he spoke foretold a second apocalypse.